everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Caitlin and I upload a whole bunch of different types of videos on this channel, mainly surrounding true crime and psychological cases, as well as a little bit of fashion and lifestyle sprinkled in where I can. Now today I'm back discussing the case of KRISTINE Kupka, very mysterious disappearance that I'm sure a lot of you will have a lot of different opinions on. But before we get started discussing the case, I just want to go through my usual disclaimer that I like to include at the start of all my videos, just letting you guys know that I'm not claiming to be an expert in this case or any of the other cases I cover over on my channel. I'm simply relaying the information I'm able to find myself through researching certain sources on the internet. And since only certain sources are actually accessible to me, it means that I may get things wrong, leave things out or mispronounce things, and I genuinely apologise if I do any of those things. I'm not trying to do anyone any harm or an injustice. I'm simply working with the information that I have available to me. With all that being said, we shall just go ahead and get started discussing the disappearance of KRISTINE Kupka. KRISTINE Kupka was born on the 3rd of May in the year of 1970, and her case is definitely one that has gained a lot of attention over the years since it is so strange and it remains completely unsolved to this day. KRISTINE was an extremely intelligent woman who was known to be very outspoken and opinionated, as well as extremely driven. At the time of her case taking place, she was studying philosophy at something called the Baruch College, I apologise if I've said that wrong, which was a university located in Manhattan in New York. She was 28 years old with red hair and blue eyes, and she was a particularly popular young woman who was extremely driven, like I said, and she was close to successfully graduating from this degree, and she had all these amazing plans to go on and build this fantastic career for herself. She was very, very, very driven. So she had dreams of attending a law school to kickstart her career, with hopes of focusing specifically on helping women in the legal sense. And part-time, aside from her studies, she waitressed at a local Caribbean restaurant to fund her way through her studies. One interesting fact that I read in a couple of sources was that she allegedly spent a large portion of her money personally renting 2 floors of a large house in Brooklyn. And she would live in this house, however she sublet all bedrooms apart from the one that she lived in to other people as an extra source of income. During her life studying at university, KRISTINE met a man named, now I apologise, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, so I will be referring to him for the rest of the video by his nickname. His name was Darshanand Rudy Persaud. Again, I apologise if I've completely butchered that name. I'm just going to refer to him for the rest of the video as Rudy. However, it just so happened that Rudy had actually been her chemistry teacher at university, although their relationship allegedly didn't actually begin until a few months after she had finished being his personal student, and this relationship continued for a number of months. Around 5 months into their relationship, KRISTINE discovered that she was pregnant with Rudy's child. It was definitely unexpected news, and KRISTINE's friends were very, very aware of the fact that Rudy really was not on board with her having this baby. And when KRISTINE had informed him that she was pregnant with his child, he had chosen this moment to inform her that he had just gotten married to another woman, meaning that at the time of the conception of the child, he had not been married, but he was in a serious relationship with someone else. KRISTINE was known to have extremely strong pro-choice beliefs, and according to her friends, she was adamant that she wanted to have her child and raise it herself with or without Rudy. One concerning fact is that around this same time, KRISTINE's friend had been aware of the fact that Rudy had very openly made it clear that he was not happy that she wanted to keep this baby, and he was adamant on convincing her to have an abortion. She had allegedly told her friends that she was becoming concerned that he would hurt her or their future baby, although it is worth noting that he never actually verbally, to their knowledge, threatened her, but she was just getting this sense that he was getting more and more frustrated that she was adamant on having this child. He had, though, apparently told KRISTINE that his family would disown him if she had his baby because they weren't married, and this was due to the fact that Rudy's family had very strong religious beliefs and culture, as his father was a Hindu priest and he was raised in a very, very religious background. But as I'm sure you've gathered by now, KRISTINE was a very, very strong and capable woman who was completely adamant she could successfully raise this child with or without Rudy. She had plans to go to law school, like I said, to further her career, and she'd worked in the restaurant for quite some time, so she'd managed to save up quite an impressive amount in her savings. So there really was no doubt that she was more than capable. It was more that she wanted her child to be able to have a healthy relationship with her father. It was more, I think, that she just wanted Rudy to be in the baby's life so that they could have some form of healthy relationship. And then at some point during the pregnancy, Christine had made the decision to get into contact with Rudy's wife, since she hadn't known of their relationship up until late, and also she hadn't been able to contact Rudy for a little while. He was ignoring all of her messages. She told his wife that she didn't want to get in the way of their relationship, she just wanted him to be a part of her baby's life, and she couldn't contact him herself because, like I said, he wasn't really responding to her. And this was the point in which Rudy's wife had learnt of his affairs outside of their marriage, and their relationship was plunged into complete turmoil, as I'm sure you can imagine, because she was completely furious with his infidelity. Christine's relationship with him didn't really grow much past this point, likely due to the fact that he was struggling with his marriage to his wife at the time and his very strong opinions on the unborn child. But then, in the later months of the year of 1998, he suddenly appeared on Christine's doorstep. She'd been very surprised to see him because they hadn't really been in contact for a little while since he'd made his opinions on the child very clear, but he'd told her that his wife had kicked him out of their home because of the affairs and that he'd been staying with one of his cousins. And Christine had told her family of his reappearance in her life and told them that her response to finding out about this from him was that she'd been encouraging him to try and make things work with his wife, to go back to her and see if they can build their relationship again. So her family had this impression that she didn't want to get back together with him, but she wanted him to be in a good enough position that he could be there for her child. And strangely enough, it appeared as though from this point forward he became extremely supportive of her keeping this child, and he was attempting to help her with things like baby names and birthing plans, which is obviously a very drastic difference to his initial opinions when he first found out. The last sighting of Christine had been on the 24th of October in 1998, outside of her home in Westminster Avenue in Brooklyn, New York City. She had left her home at around 12:30 p.m, very shortly after Rudy had entered her building. When Rudy had entered, he'd passed by one of her roommates, who later recalled him looking extremely visibly nervous as he headed towards her apartment. So Christine was 5 months pregnant at this point, and when she and Rudy had left the home that afternoon, she was wearing thin clothing and no coat, as well as having been carrying virtually no belongings and no money. Her sister would later discover that just before Christine had left her apartment with Rudy that day, she had left a message on her machine, just letting her know that her and Rudy were about to go out to look for some apartments for Rudy to live in the Queens area, and that she would be home soon and she would ring her back when she was home. Later that evening, one of Christine's roommates decided to contact her family out of concern that she hadn't been seen since this point. She hadn't returned home, which was very unlike her. Her family hadn't heard from her either, and Christine and her family, as I'm sure you probably gathered at this point, they were very, very close. So her family decided to take it upon themselves to head straight for Rudy's apartment to ask him directly where Christine is, if she wasn't already with him. And Rudy had told Christine's family that earlier that day he'd driven Christine to a shopping centre where he waited in his parked car for her to finish browsing. She had then returned to his car, and then at some point between the hours of 3 p.m. and 4 p.m, he had dropped her off a few blocks away from her apartment. And the reasoning for him doing this, so the reason he didn't drop her off at home, was that she wanted to do a food shop at a nearby health food store that was on her way home, so she could walk home from the health food store herself. But when they pushed him further as to more details like where they were and things like that, he physically was not able to specify which shopping centre he had allegedly driven her to that day. And it can be argued that yes, he didn't go inside the shopping centre, he waited in his parked car, but the flip side of that is he drove her there. He could at least give directions. If it happened, if he had driven her to the shopping centre, you'd think he'd be able to give some sort of vague location of where he took her to shop. And Christine's family were still not very convinced of her safety, and they not only reported her missing to the police, but they also began to search for themselves. They asked people who lived in the same area as her in hopes of them having seen her walking about that day if they could pinpoint any sort of timeline that maybe matched Rudy's and maybe didn't. The owner of a laundromat in the area in which Christine had lived informed them that he'd seen her walking past his shop earlier that afternoon, and the owner of the health food store that Christine had wanted to visit allegedly claimed that she may have seen her around the area at around 7 p.m, which is obviously a lot later than Rudy's timeline would have suggested. But then at a later point, this store owner changed her statement and said that she didn't think it was Christine because she'd seen her in these distinctive trousers that Christine didn't own and wasn't wearing on the day of her disappearance. I get the impression, I don't know in terms of how dedicated the law enforcement were, there isn't a lot of information regarding the early point in the investigation with the law enforcement officers, but a lot of the sources state things that happened to the family members. The family members did a lot. They were very active in the initial search for her. They set out to do a lot themselves. Law enforcement had allegedly only taken Rudy in for formal questioning on one occasion immediately following her disappearance, and since he had hired a lawyer straight after this, he refused to be questioned any further. And so Kristine's family decided to hire a private investigator themselves to search for answers while continually raising awareness of the search for Kristine. Many people involved in the case, as well as multiple investigators relating to the case, have since made their opinions known publicly, and the majority appear to all share the same view that Rudy was directly involved in some way. He was technically unable to provide an alibi for the time of Kristine's disappearance, but not much can really be done with this if there isn't any tangible evidence that prove that he had some direct involvement, and sadly they had very little evidence to work with, especially since the fact that she was a grown, capable woman, so she could have left of her own accord. The investigation was revisited numerous times in recent years, including in 2010, when law enforcement had used cadaver dogs to search a property that had, at the time of her disappearance, been owned by a family member of Rudy's. The dog had given an indication of a certain area in the ground having had contact at some point with human remains, but their search at that point found nothing of the sorts. And there remains a lot of uncertainty regarding this case, since there seems to be no evidence indicating that anyone was involved in Kristine's disappearance whatsoever, despite the believed possibility of foul play having been involved. Rudy has since moved on with his life and is leading a successful career, and the reality is many people believe he was involved in some way, but there really is just no evidence apart from the family's belief and people's dislike of him and distrust of him. And it seems to be that the only thing really supporting all of these theories kind of blaming Rudy is the existence of a convincing motive. Sadly, Kristine's case remains unsolved to this day, and there have been no updates in recent years despite law enforcement and Kristine's family doing an absolutely fantastic job at keeping her name and story known. And that is everything I'm going to discuss today regarding Kristine Kupka's disappearance. It is awful. I genuinely hope that she is out there somewhere perfectly well, that she is supporting herself and her baby, and that she just removed herself from a not very nice situation with Rudy. But whatever the truth is, I genuinely just hope that her family receive some answers. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and I will see you guys very soon for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.